What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Touchline Talk here on a Tuesday. Plenty to get to as always. We finally have a practically completed European season. Wasn't actually sure we were going to get to this point, but it's there. Everybody is pretty much finished. We've got the championship playoff final today at Wembley, which is pretty much the only thing left on the calendar until you get to the European competitions later this week, which means we're going to take a look back in our second segment today, looking at some of the winners and losers of this season as we head into next season, which is going to start in just over a month here. And before we get to our first five, the way we start every show on Tuesday, I did want to take a minute to acknowledge that Erick has announced his retirement. He is obviously one of the best goalkeepers of this era. 3 Champions League titles. He's the all-time Champions League leader in appearances with 177. He won the 2008 Euros, 2010 World Cup, 2012 Euros with Spain. He was at Real Madrid from 1990 to 2015 in some capacity, at the youth level and on their reserve teams, and then obviously with the first team as well. And then he went and joined Porto. You know, the accolades are just endless. So many teams of the season, and just an incredible career. He's right up in that top echelon with your Gianluigi Buffons and your Petr Cechs of this sort of era that's coming to a close as we transition into the next era of goalkeepers. I don't have all that much to say. I mean, his accomplishments, his success speak for themselves. So I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that a terrific career has come to an end. Well done, Iker Casillas. Wish you all the best of luck in your retirement. And now, it is time, momentarily here, to get into our first 5. And there's no other place to start than Arsenal. Arsenal give up an early goal to Christian Pulisic in the FA Cup final. Draw a penalty. Aubameyang does his thing. And then Aubameyang puts together a phenomenal second goal. You know, he had been going right all game, the ability to cut that back left, to have the presence of mind to actually, and he was sort of explaining his thought process. He was very intentional that he was sort of setting that up, and he knew he wanted to go left there, and that he thought that was going to work. And the ability to make that split-second kind of decision, it's a testament to how great of a player he is and how great of a soccer mind he is. He's so intelligent. He's so good. You saw it in the semifinals. You saw it again this weekend. That team is just not anywhere near where they are, which isn't, exactly where they want to be. But it would be much worse if he was not there. So they come back, deserving winners. Bad refereeing game. Mateo Kovacic should have stayed on the field. Maybe that changes things. So you can point to some events in that game and say Chelsea were unlucky, and that's absolutely true. But at the same time, it's just one of those games where some things go against you, but Arsenal took advantage. Arsenal were deserving winners. And so now you've got your first trophy since 16-17, which was, of course, another FA Cup. I'm not counting the Community Shield in that, because that's not a real trophy. No disrespect to the Community Shield, but it's just a different universe. It's a preseason game. 14th FA Cup all time. I talked about before, but this is part of Arsenal's legacy as a club, is that they absolutely dominate this competition. And even when things aren't going perfectly in the league, they still show up and win this thing on a regular basis. And if nothing else, I mean, getting into the Europa League is huge, not only for the ability to compete in Europe, but the financial ramifications and the financial benefits that come with it. And it gives Mikel Arteta the trophy, that boost going into next season of, hey, it wasn't perfect. And even, they have been much better since he came. That pretty much goes without saying at this point. There's clearly optimism there and a belief that he's the right guy, and there's every reason to think that that's true. They would have finished, I believe it's 5th, based on what they've done in the Premier League since he got there. So they're still not a Champions League top 4 quality team. But they're clearly improving. This is the kind of thing that they're able to do. I talked about after the Liverpool game. this is who they can be next year. They can go beat anybody on any given day when they play well. And it all starts with Aubameyang. The biggest ramification of this victory is that you saw how happy he was. You show him, look, you can win trophies here. You get to play in Europe again, even if it's not the Champions League. But if you win the Europa League, you're going to the Champions League the following season. And so now there's all this momentum about getting that contract done, giving Aubameyang the money that he wants, and Aubameyang actually being willing to sign it. He sent out a vague tweet that it's not exactly clear what it means, but it hinted that he was staying. If you can get that contract done, all of a sudden you're moving in the right direction. There are still flaws on this team, particularly at center back, that are going to prevent them from staying with your Manchester Cities, your Liverpools, your Chelseas moving forward. But it's closer. And the bottom line is that even when this team was doing a little bit better in the league, finishing 5th or 6th or finishing ahead of Spurs or whatever it might be, or even winning FA Cups, there was no real sense of optimism. There was no belief that you could see progress and that things were going to get better moving forward. This is the first time in what feels like forever you look at it and go, okay, it's an exciting time to be an Arsenal supporter. It's an exciting time to be following this team because you see progress and you see potential and you see this thing actually getting back to a point where they can get into the Champions League again, which is obviously where this club wants to be and expects to be. That's all Mikel Arteta and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. They clearly have a good chemistry and a respect for each other that was not there right at the beginning. There were some questions on both sides, and rightfully so. But you just can't dispute what Aubameyang's doing and what Arteta has done with this team. That's a big, big win to just make a statement and to get that momentum going into next season. You regroup, you try and get some things done in the transfer window, but you're feeling much better. You've got this positivity with Aubameyang. You seal that contract, and all of a sudden things are really starting to look up for Arsenal. Would have been a very different situation had they lost that game and Aubameyang goes, I'm not sure I can commit myself here when it doesn't look like we're moving forward because I want to play at the highest level and I want to win stuff. But now you gave him a trophy, and you know, in a year or two, it's not out of the question that this team could be fighting for a Champions League spot. I'm not sure it's next season, but we'll see what happens. And at the bottom line, like I said, is that finally there is optimism and belief and hope. And that is where everything starts when you're trying to rebuild and revitalize a club like Arteta is trying to. That is step one, and he's already accomplished that. Jumping over to MLS. When the MLS's back tournament started, we all had Orlando, Philly, Minnesota, and Portland as, perennial powers in this league, as the semifinalists in this tournament, right? I mean, this is, again, the beauty of this league. There is just no rhyme or reason to the things that happen. There's no point trying to predict anything, because who knows? You can identify who the best teams are, but very rarely do the best teams actually go and win. And you can identify who the quote-unquote super teams are, the big money spenders. Doesn't mean they're going to win either. Philly destroyed Kansas City on Sporting Kansas City set pieces. Finally, the Union actually got going offensively. It wasn't for the entire game, it was for a very short amount of time. They didn't look particularly convincing or particularly unconvincing. I mean, they were fine the rest of the game. But it's not like it was a comprehensive 90-minute performance. Jim Curtin is still looking for that. But you saw how good this team can be, and that was a phenomenal pass from Brendan Aronson, who is not going to be in this league much longer. There's a reason scouts were showing up to watch that game in particular. They were really good for that stretch of time. At Kansas City, I mean, you could see it in Peter Vermees's mannerisms and comments and just visible frustration. You can't give up 2 goals off of your own attacking set pieces. But that happened, and then Minnesota, very comprehensive, convincing victory over San Jose. They both put together really good performances from a who was the better team on the field, who was a deserving winner standpoint. And so there are 2 of your semifinalists. Those games weren't particularly close. Then you got the more interesting, more exciting games. Portland goes down fairly early to NYCFC and then gets a goal from Sebastian Blanco right before halftime to just sort of steady some nerves, give him a little bit of confidence. And then you bring on Diego Valeri, and the complexion of the game changes. He scores your second, and you win 2-1. And we're going to get to the Philly-Portland matchup and why this is such an interesting one for me. But that's the kind of thing that Portland can do now because of bringing in a Jimmy Chara to play on the wing, along with Blanco and some of these other pieces that they have, is that you can bring Diego Valeri off the bench. He doesn't have to start a game for you to stay in it, be competitive, and then he comes on and he makes the difference. As he continues to sort of evolve into the next stage of his career, that's what it's going to be about. And you saw just how dynamic he can still be in this game. And then we get to Orlando City, LAFC. I said it, and I'm going to say it again. LAFC still has not proven they can win this game. The game where things don't go right, the game where it's a little bit ugly, where the other team's midfield is actually able to hold on to the ball for a little bit and to bother you and to ask some questions. Orlando's midfield is playing well enough to do that right now. So can you find a way in the ugly game where things aren't pretty and things don't work the way Bob Bradley wants them to? They have not proven that the answer is yes. And so they go ahead after Nani misses the penalty. It's not like Orlando just rallied at the end of this game. Orlando was good throughout. But they find a way to go ahead, and then you give up a equalizer to John Moutinho, ironically, former LAFC player, in the 90th minute. So now it's in a shootout, and it's just a game of chance at that point. And so Nani, of course, steps up to the spot again and converts, sends them into the semifinals. It's the same tune with LAFC. Doesn't change my opinion. They're clearly the best team in this league. But can you, in a knockout situation where if you lose, you're gone, can you find a way to win a game like this? They just have not shown the ability to do so. Bob Bradley can complain about that narrative all he wants. It's still there. It's not just can you beat other good teams in the knockout stage. It's can you do it multiple ways. Can you do it when you are not able to dominate and dictate the terms of a game like they were against Seattle? It's not about beating Seattle because that was played the way LAFC wants it to. They're going to win that game 99 times out of 100. It's this game where they're not quite at their best, where they allow the other team to hang around, and then something happens and you find a way back into the game. It's a real question with this team and the way that they play and how determined Bob Bradley is to play attacking, attractive, to a certain extent, reckless soccer. That it's not this balance between offense and defense. It's all offense, all passing the ball, and it comes back to bite you in situations like this. You got to find a way to be able to do both. And so here comes Orlando. Nani's been spectacular. You've got difference makers alongside him. The question is the striker position without Dom Dwyer. But they're getting enough right now. And at this point, the last thing I'm going to say on these four teams, we're going to get more into these matchups and what's next. But this is absolutely wide open. I was not sure your Orlandos and Phillies could actually go on and win this tournament, but because your superpowers, so to speak, your LAFCs, your Seattles, your Atlantas are all gone, absolutely all four of these teams are looking at this thing going, why not us? That's just where we are. I love this league for this reason. That even though you've got these financial disparities, there's something, it feels like, every year where if you're just a little bit better at building your roster and using your money, you look at this and you go, we can beat anybody in this league. If we just get to the playoffs, we have a chance. And that's especially in this scenario where it's not, you don't even have to play well for 34 games. You just got to play well in the group stage. That's what you're seeing, is that these mid-tier teams who have gotten some confidence, gotten some chemistry, played, hit their best form at the right time, are all of a sudden playing each other now instead of your Atlanta's, Toronto's, LAFC's, etc. I cannot wait for these semifinals. I think this is great for the league. You're not getting as many eyeballs as you would like anyway, so you might as well get some parity in there during just this unpredictable, chaotic time. Very, very much looking forward to these semifinals. Third thing here, I did want to mention this just because I think it's somewhat interesting. So, Atlanta has found a temporary replacement for Joseph Martinez. His name is Erick Torres. Now, you might remember Erick Torres from his stint with the Houston Dynamo, where he really struggled at the beginning. Then he had one good season with 14 goals. And it feels like he's been around forever, but he's still only 27 years old. But the point I want to make here is that his most productive season, of his most productive stretch of his career, I should say, came as a Chivas USA loanee, the team that is now extinct and has been extinct for a while. He scored 22 goals in 44 games for them. That's the best he's played. He went back to Mexico. He has not been great. He is absolutely an upgrade from the other options that Atlanta is looking at up front right now to lead this line. And he doesn't have to be Joseph Martinez because you've got P.D. Martinez and Ezekiel Barco and others behind him. But you're also, that's not including a Julian Gressel anymore, who was more important to this team than I think anybody really realized. And so Erick Torres is not Joseph Martinez. And if this league does continue as they're planning once we get done with MLS's back tournament, it's going to help. And it might be enough to get them back in the conversation about winning this league and winning MLS Cup. And maybe this is exactly what he needs. He just needs another fresh start, some playmakers around him to just sort of set him up, give him some confidence, and then he's going to get rolling because he's got a tremendous amount of talent. But I have questions here as to whether this is actually going to make the difference Atlanta needs it to in terms of what their club expects and what their standards that they have set. He hasn't exactly delivered the way that Atlanta is going to need him to if they're going to win an MLS Cup or reach an MLS Cup since Chivas USA days. I just thought that was a very sort of telling statistic here. He did eventually sort of figure things out in Houston and had a good year. It's a temporary solution, as I said. I don't know that they could have done much better because you're not going to go invest a significant amount of money in a new DP or a new striker when Martinez is coming back and he's your guy, obviously. So this might work out brilliantly. I just have some questions as to how much of a difference it's going to make at the end of the day based on where this club wants to be. Our fourth thing, Ciro Immobile. Congratulations on winning the European Golden Shoe. 36 goals in 37 appearances this season, ties the Serie A record. He is the first non-Barcelona Real Madrid player to even tie for this award since Luis Suarez with Liverpool in 2013-14. He tied that year. He's the first Serie A winner since Francesco Totti in 2006-2007. And he's the first player not named Messi, Ronaldo, and Suarez to score the most goals in Europe since 2008-2009. Messi had won this award 3 years in a row. I don't have all that much to say. Obviously, Immobile had a terrific season and has been one of the better strikers in Europe for a while now. But he took it to another level this season, and it's just those stats I just read off were pretty staggering to me. This has been an award. It's not just that we've recognized Messi and Ronaldo as the best players in the world. It's that they are actually literally scoring more goals every season than everybody else. Which is just rather remarkable, a testament to how great they are and a testament to how good Immobile was this season. That he was able to win this award outright, to take it away from Messi in the first time. And, we just don't usually make a big deal out of this. And it was really Lewandowski who was the one challenging him this year. But we don't usually make a big deal out of this because It's just another accolade that Messi or Ronaldo or Suarez pick up. They're off to bigger and better things than just being Europe's leading goal scorer. But all of a sudden, it's more interesting when it's a Ciro Immobile, or even if Lewandowski had won. This was the first season in a while where your best goal scorers in Europe, as good as Messi and Ronaldo were this year, they weren't quite at that same level in terms of actual goal production. So I just wanted to bring that up and read some stats about that because I found it rather interesting. And congratulations to Ciro Immobile. It was a phenomenal season. Our fifth and final thing, it's official. Eddie Howe has decided by mutual consent to leave Bournemouth. Usually when that phrase is used, it implies a firing or a strong nudge to depart. I have no reason to believe that that's the case here. I genuinely think this was a decision Eddie Howe made because Bournemouth would just be wildly irrational to let him go off the basis of a relegation that I will continue to say I don't think he is really at fault for all that much. It was just bad combination of bad circumstances and he didn't have enough to survive. Unlucky that the first time they struggle they go down. But this is a man who has poured almost his entire professional career into this club. And now they've decided that it's best to part ways. I think this is a good decision on Howe's part just because you can only take Bournemouth so far. This team was on the brink of not existing when he became their manager. He got them into the Premier League for multiple seasons. There's just, the bar is only so high. That ceiling is only so high. And Eddie Howe has clearly proven he can do this at the highest level. And so the question now becomes, where does he go next? Does he want some time off? Because you're looking at options at this moment in time. The Watford job is open. But if I'm Eddie Howe, I want no part of that. I don't want to be the guy stepping into that mess with that ownership group that has such a quick trigger. I want to be able to build something again. Because theoretically, any job he's going to take, it's going to be a project. He's not walking into Manchester City or Chelsea with the players they have coming in. That's just not the reality of the situation. And so you look at these other options. I don't see him going to Watford. I think that would just be a terrible mistake on his part. So you look at a Crystal Palace who's been heavily linked. But that's not necessarily an immediate thing. Roy Hodgson's done a tremendous job there. To me, the most interesting from a project standpoint is West Ham. Particularly if they start off poorly again next season. Because you can't get yourself in a relegation battle again if you're West Ham. You just can't. You can't let David Moyes continue if that's what's happening. But you're also not going to fire him right now. And you've got, again, does Eddie Howe really want to try and turn that thing around? Because you got a lot of work to do at West Ham. But if he can actually do it, all of a sudden you're looking at a team that can absolutely be competing in Europe in a couple seasons if you get that turnaround going and you get some momentum. I also think Aston Villa sort of falls into that category of teams with a lot of potential if you can just sort of fix some things and get things going in the right direction. But Villa is also not firing Dean Smith anytime soon. They would have to have a catastrophic start to next season for that to be a quick thing. So the other name I'll throw, well, there are two other ones, but the other Premier League team I'll throw out there is Spurs. I've always wanted Eddie Howe at Arsenal. That's obviously not going to happen now. That to me was just a perfect fit. And I also think he fits pretty well at Spurs. If they decide that they're done with the Jose Mourinho experiment, he's a guy you can put in there immediately. You're going to get attacking style of play. You're going to get some positive things going. And from his perspective, that's again, right, that's a club that's built to compete in Europe. It's going to be in the Europa League. Obviously has a Champions League pedigree. That's a no-brainer if Spurs are offering you that job. But you got to give him, I don't see them firing Mourinho 5 games into next season, which puts Eddie Howe in this strange position if he doesn't want the Watford job and he isn't going to go take a job in the championship. You got to wait a little bit, which maybe that's what he wants to do. The other name I'm going to throw out there, and I don't think this is going to happen because I think it's beneath Eddie Howe and he would never take this job, but it's the team that we just mentioned. If I'm Atlanta United and I am that front office, that is the first call I am making to judge his interest. I don't think he would be really interested in any significant way. But you want to talk about identity and what that club wants to be? That's Eddie Howe. And instead of having to try and sort of fight against the tide of the money of the Premier League, now all of a sudden you're as financially backed as any team in your league. But it's Major League Soccer, not the Premier League. I have no reason to think that's going to happen. All I'm saying is if I'm Atlanta United, that's where I'm going first. I'm gonna make that call and make him tell me no. Because he's a perfect fit for them too. He is the opposite of Frank de Boer. And Frank de Boer was the opposite of Atlanta United. They are a perfect match. I don't think it's gonna happen. So we'll see. I'm firmly in the pro Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe needs to be managing in the Premier League camp. We'll see what happens. I'm really just curious where his mind's at right now, how much of a project he's willing to take on, how long he's willing to wait. Maybe he's sort of looking at it and going, I don't feel, after the emotional toll of a relegation battle and leaving this club I love so much, I don't have this burning desire to get right back into management. I'll take 3/4 of a season, or I'll wait for a job that I'm really interested in, that I see potential in. I'm not just going to jump at the first one that's offered to me. So it could be a little while before we see him again. All I know is there's going to be teams in the Premier League who are going to fire managers sometime next season that are going to be looking for something. And more times than not, Eddie Howe is the guy I'm putting at the top of that list. Again, it depends on circumstances, but I am a huge, huge believer in him, and I think he deserves an opportunity to do it at a higher level with more financial backing than Bournemouth gave him. With all due respect, that's not a criticism, it's just the reality of the club at their situation. Give him that opportunity to build a team capable of competing in Europe. I firmly believe he can do it. But right now, he's a man without a job, and it's just a tough way to go out and for that relationship with Bournemouth to end, but I think it's best for everybody involved. Bournemouth can regroup, figure out where they want to go from here. Eddie Howe gets to live up to his potential and take on a new challenge. It's the right time. It's just sad that it ended this way and not on better terms. So those are our first 5. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, winners and losers of the 2019-20 European season. It's a little bit of a twist. It's not just pure winners and losers. I'll explain more after we take our break, but wanted to just do a little something to acknowledge that all of the leagues domestically are done. And so we're gonna look at who feels really good about what happened, who doesn't feel so good about what happened. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. As I said before the break, we're going to do some winners and losers here, looking back on the entire 1920 European season, specifically looking with the idea that these winners and losers are in the context of looking ahead to this season and just sort of the trajectory of the club moving forward. It's not sort of a literal what happened last season kind of thing. It's more about the implications moving forward. So I just wanted to mention that before we get going. Our first winner is Bayern Munich. Last season, Bayern was a top 10 team in Europe, maybe. They were the best team in Germany, but Dortmund almost caught them. And they weren't exactly dangerous in the Champions League. This is one of those clubs. It's not about winning the league. Winning the league is expected. It's about, can you compete in the Champions League? Can you reach a semifinals, reach a final? And under Niko Kovac, they had just taken a massive step back in that regard. So this year, they go and win the league by 13 points. They're in terrific form as you head into a wide open Champions League. That they are, they've got to probably be among the favorites, if not the favorite. And you add Leroy Sané to the list of attacking talent they already have. So next season, you're looking at, it's going to be even harder for Dortmund to keep pace with them than it was this year. And you're all of a sudden right back in the conversation with Hansi Flick of being the best team in Europe, of being able to compete for a Champions League title, even if you don't win it, but just being a real threat. You know, it's just sort of hard to take them seriously in the European competition, European context. Under Niko Kovac, they were just a step behind your Liverpools and your Ajaxes last season and your Barcelona's, Real Madrid's. They had taken a huge, huge step back. 1 second. And now they're right back where Bayern Munich is supposed to be. So that's why I have them as my winner. It's not what they did this year. It's just the momentum and the confidence and what they're building heading into next season. First loser, Barcelona. We talked about this in the Supporters' Corner a while back. They're just a mess. And they finished 5 points behind Real Madrid in La Liga, which is something they've dominated. And you've got, in addition to Messi's unhappiness, the frustration with the board, Arthur has just decided he's not going to finish out the season and play in the Champions League before he leaves for Juventus. It's just a mess all around. And so the question, it's not one of those things where it's just a bad season and you go and regroup next year, for example, where Manchester City is at, and you still feel like you have a chance to win the Champions League. You've got Messi out here saying if we don't step up, we're going to lose to Napoli. You know, they have a lot of work to do. And the fact that Zidane is back at Real Madrid too doesn't help anything. Sorry about that. They are in a tough spot. They got to turn this thing around quickly. And they're sort of in that, I feel like, in that spot where Bayern Munich were last year that I just talked about. Yes, it's a big name. Yes, they're one of the best teams in Europe. But there's a difference between being able to compete domestically and compete continentally. Compete in the Champions League. And they are just a step behind some of these other teams right now. So they got to figure this thing out quick. They got to figure out what to do with Griezmann. It was a very, very rough go for Barcelona this season. We'll see what happens in the Champions League. But unless they pull off something unpredictable and unforeseen, they got a lot of questions heading into next year. Second winner, Atalanta. Atalanta scored 98 goals in 38 league games. That's 2.58 per game in Serie A. 17 more than anybody else in the league. They had a 50 goal differential. It makes you wonder how they didn't actually win the league. They finished in third. So, clearly they have some work to do defensively, and they had some difficulties in tight games sometimes, and they had to go fight back from early deficits and do some pretty incredible late magic. So they're not complete, and they're not ready to challenge Juventus yet. But if they can build on this thing, you're back in the Champions League. You're still in the Champions League this year. So you're going to get that experience. You have the financial backing heading into next season, knowing you're playing in the Champions League again. If you can get enough pieces in there, all of a sudden they're one of the best teams they already are one of the best teams in Italy, but all of a sudden they are right there with Juventus. They were just one of the stories of the season. I haven't been able to talk about them as much as I would like to, but I was just blown away. They are so much fun to watch. They got to do a better job defensively. But in terms of teams that helped themselves and their reputation this year, and that helped the trajectory of their future moving forward, there's an argument nobody helped themselves more this season than Atalanta did. I can't wait to watch them against PSG. I can't wait to see what they do next season. Our second loser is Wolves. And this is why I wanted to clarify how I'm approaching this at the beginning. Because based on this season, this loser is Leicester, absolutely. When you drop from second to fifth and miss out on Champions League. But the reality is that Leicester's still playing in the Europa League. Still has that extra money coming in. Got James Maddison to sign a new contract. Is already apparently doing some work in the transfer market that it's not official yet, so there are some rumors about some things happening. We'll see what happens with Ben Chilwell. Of course, Leicester's disappointed, but Leicester still has Europa League to look forward to. Wolves took 7 points from their last 6 games, which put them behind Spurs on goal difference. Arsenal win the FA Cup and take their Europa League spot. So now if Wolves don't win this season's Europa League, they're not playing in Europe next season. And while it's somewhat unfair to be disappointed when you're not a Big Six club that you're not playing in Europe, that's what this team is here to do. That's what the financial investment is here to do. They expect to be playing in Europe and challenging for the top 4. And they had a good season. They just had a slow start because there's just something about that Europa League qualifying and having to play in Europa League when you're not used to it. The way it tests your squad depth and things. The teams, you saw it with Burnley too. Some of these teams really struggle domestically when they're competing in Europe. But that should not be an excuse for Wolves. They're too deep, they're too talented. And so they, in the span of a handful of games, went from competing for a Champions League spot to missing out on Europe entirely. And for a team that's been moving forward every season, they took a step back. And this is also a situation where maybe now you lose Adama Traore because teams that are playing in Europe obviously want him because he's spectacular. So next season to me is sort of a breaking point for this Wolves experiment and project. In the sense that if you can't get into Europe again, if you can't push for the Champions League, you're looking at your Ruben Neves's, your Raul Jimenez's of the world, John Moutinho, and you're wondering, can you continue to sell them on this? Can you continue to convince them to stay when you're not competing in Europe? That was sort of the idea, is that this is going to become another one of those big clubs that's fighting at the top of the table. Maybe not to win the league, but absolutely to get a Europa League spot. They also could win this year's Europa League and end up in the Champions League. There are things that can happen. But from a domestic standpoint and where they sit at this moment in time, I think they were hurt more by this season than even Leicester, which is really saying something. But at least Leicester have Europa League, European competition to look forward to, and some momentum with their players, where I think there are more questions than answers when it comes to Wolves. Our third winner, team I don't think we have ever mentioned before on this show, Rennes. Rennes are in the Champions League for the first time in the club's history. They're led by a 39-year-old manager named Julian Stephan. And this is not exactly a surprise when you look at what they've been able to do recently. They lost to Arsenal in the Europa League round of 16 last season, won a cup by beating PSG in penalties, and just lost to PSG in another cup final this season. This team has proven they are one of the best in France. There's PSG and everybody else, but Rennes have become as good as anybody else. And they've got the 17-year-old midfielder named Eduardo Camavinga, who Real Madrid is all over and is probably going to get at some point. But this is just an incredible story. This is not your Marseilles, your Olympic Lyons, your other French teams with a proud history, even your Monacos and what they were able to do a while back with the Kylian Mbappe team. There are other teams in France that have caused a stir and made some noise on the continent in the European competitions. Rennes is not one of them. But this is just incredible what this club is doing. And so now you go in knowing you have Champions League. You can bolster that squad, hopefully. They've got some questions about what they're going to be able to do because of COVID and the financial ramifications and all of that. So this might be a short-term thing. And can you hold on to your players is always the question when a team comes up like this and builds into one of the better teams in Europe. But what a season. And they're in a terrific spot. You know, it doesn't get better in the Champions League. That's how you transform your club. Just look at what it's done for Leicester. That one season, you know. So you finish near the top of the table. Again, they're not challenging PSG. But I wanted to put them in here to just recognize how far this team has come and what they might be able to do in terms of establishing themselves as one of the top teams in France moving forward. Our final loser is Napoli. Napoli finished outside the top 5 in Serie A for the first time since 2009-2010. The past 4 seasons, Napoli finished second, third, second, and second. They were 4 points out of 6th place this year. They have been the second best team in Italy, and the only team that's really caused Juventus trouble until this season. And then Atalanta happened, and Inter Milan had a better season. And barely came in second, you know. Juventus clinched it early, but barely survived at the end of the day. And so now, had Napoli not won Coppa Italia, Napoli's not playing European football next season. They did, so they're playing in the Europa League, and they're going to be one of the favorites. But teams are coming up in Italy. There are some teams who are finally starting to build a challenge to Juventus and to establish themselves, particularly Atalanta and Inter Milan. All of a sudden, it's not just sort of guaranteed that Napoli can quietly slide in there at the second or third spot and get into the Champions League and cause some teams some trouble and get to your round of 6, your knockout round, your quarterfinals, things like that. Because they've proven they're capable of playing with anybody in the Champions League. But you got to take care of business domestically first, or you don't get that opportunity. So Napoli took a huge step back this year. We'll see what ramifications it has in the transfer market and what kind of players they lose not having that Champions League to offer next season. But sort of like I wanted to mention Rennes for all the positive reasons and what's happening at that club. This could be a short-term thing for Napoli, but it's becoming much more difficult to just sort of write yourselves into a Champions League spot in Italy. And that's what Napoli have been able to do the past 4, 5, 6 seasons. And all of a sudden, had they not won a cup, they're not playing in any European competition. So I wanted to acknowledge the questions that come with that and the step back that Napoli took this season. All right, that's part 2. We're going to take a break. When we come back, what's next? As always, we're going to not talk about that many games, but we're going to go in depth with not only the Portland-Philly matchup in MLS is back Wednesday night, but the championship promotion playoff final at Wembley this afternoon. We're going to talk about sort of the key players you need to know and what will happen, sort of the historical context, what's at stake here when Fulham and Brentford face off. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Touchline Talk. As I said before, we're going to get right into a sort of very detailed, in-depth edition of what's next. I also want to acknowledge that the Europa League starts back up on Wednesday. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to do a deep dive into both the Europa League and Champions League on Thursday, so that's why we're not going to touch that today. I'm aware the games start on Wednesday, but that's not going to be part of what we're doing at What's Next here. So as I mentioned, we got Fulham Brentford this afternoon. Winner of this game goes to the Premier League next season, joins Leeds United and West Brom. Fulham is tried and tested in this game. This is how they came up in 17-18. They won this exact playoff. And Tom Kearney scored the goal to win this playoff at Wembley to send them to the Premier League. And Tom Kearney is still at Fulham. Brentford, on the other hand, have never been in the Premier League in the Premier League era. Since things have sort of restructured, this is uncharted territory if they win this game. And they spent the first half of this decade in League One. Third tier. They came up to the championship. They've now become one of the better teams in the championship. So some players to know here. I already mentioned Tom Kearney. Tom Kearney might be the most important player on the field in this game. And I say that because not only is he the emotional heartbeat of this Fulham team, he's the creative force in midfield. He's the one that's been there before, that delivered the goal to send them up last time. And because you're facing this duo of Said Benrahma and Ollie Watkins at Brentford. So Benrahma is your sort of counterpart in terms of the creative force, that central hub for Brentford. If Kearney can't match Benrahma, or at least create some chances and stay competitive with him in that area, Brentford are going to win this game. Kearney has to be able to create chances and to open the game up for, theoretically, Alexander Mitrovic. Mitrovic is the leading scorer in the championship this season with 26 goals. He missed the semifinal because of injury, both legs of it. But Fulham coach Scott Parker says Mitrovic is fit and ready to go, which means he probably starts. Of course, there's always a chance he comes off the bench. I don't see how you can do that when you're playing Brentford and know you're going to need to score goals. But if Kearney isn't performing well and really doing things to keep Fulham moving forward and keep them dangerous offensively, I think they're going to have a really tough time staying with Brentford. So you get your goal scorer back, and that's the only hope that Fulham have for me. Apologize again, jeez. Brentford are the better team, have been the better team all season. Clearly have the better attacking talent. I love Ollie Watkins. I talked about this after the semifinal. I can't say enough good things about him. So, he was right behind Mitrovic in that goal race. And so, you need Mitrovic and you need Tom Kearney to match Said Benrahma and Ollie Watkins. The one advantage Fulham have is, as I mentioned, they've been here before. This is not foreign to them. They had a different manager. They had some different players. But the core of this team is somewhat similar to the one that actually went through this process and then promptly got relegated from the Premier League in a rather disastrous fashion. But these guys have done this before, and Brentford has never had an opportunity like this. And most of these guys have never played on this kind of stage before. Which I also think is a benefit to Brentford, that this is being played without fans. That there's not as much added pressure with a packed Wembley. It's just sort of you're playing. I think that helps them as well. So, all that being said, I'm going with Brentford. I believe in this team. I believe in what they're doing. Hopefully, my hope one way or another, is that Ali Watkins and Saeed Benrahma end up in the Premier League next season. So if nothing else, watch this game for them and just see how good this Brentford team is. Of course, this is the one-off playoff final. Anything can happen. But I'm going to go with Brentford and say that the better team wins. The other game we're going to talk about here, Wednesday night, the first MLS is back semifinal, Philadelphia Union, Portland Timbers. This is a fascinating matchup to me for a couple of reasons. And the first is just simply how similar these two teams are. Not only do they want to play the same way, they're comfortable giving you the ball, they want to hit you on the counterattack. They've got some just workhorses in midfield. They're not, with the exception of Sebastian Blanco, they're not exactly your nannies in terms of technical ability and just creating chances out of nothing and attacking all the time. They're more of your Diego Chara, Jose Martinez, Alejandro Bedoya workhorses who just cover ground and tackle like crazy. You could throw Jamiro Montero in there too. Erick Williamson's done a terrific job for Portland in that role as well. This is very much your sort of resolute, hardworking midfields. And then you throw in the other part of this that's very similar. So one of the questions in this game is who's going to have the ball? And also both these teams are fairly comfortable on the ball. It's not that they don't know what to do with it, but they're just used to playing and prefer to play without it. They want to hit you on the counter. They want to move from back to front quickly and pass between the lines and just move you around fast and get behind you, just like Philadelphia did to Kansas City. But they also have the technicians and the ability to hold on to the ball and break you down that way. But it's different from, and one of the conversations you saw in terms of who Philadelphia wanted to play since they knew they were through earlier was, do you want Portland or do you want NYCFC, who are going to have the ball, who want possession, who want to build? That seemed like a better matchup for Philly, so they got the team that looks like them instead. The other reason that these teams are so similar that I find so interesting is what I mentioned before with Diego Valeri. If Diego Valeri doesn't start this game, you're talking about Ilsinho and Valeri coming off the bench for these two teams. There are very few players, if any, who would come off the bench in a semifinal in this tournament for any team in the league that can change a game the way those two players can. You've seen it with Ilsinho a boatload of times, particularly last season. He hasn't been quite as good in Orlando. And you saw with Diego Valeri last game Portland played. They are absolute game changers who just, the goal is to save their legs and to keep them healthy and rested until the most important moments of the game, and that's when they come in and make a difference. So I'm curious to see what Giovanni Savarese does in terms of his starting lineup and how he uses Valeri, but I don't think Valeri's going to start. I think you go with the same 11 you had last time. And then the other similarity here I see with these teams is up front. Portland starts with a one striker compared to Philly's two, but it's your Jeremy Abobase's, Sergio Santos's, Kasper Shibilko's. They just kind of get in good positions, and they've been playing well in this tournament. Shibilko, not so much. He's a guy I look at to potentially have a big statement at some point in this tournament, that he hasn't really grabbed hold of it like he did last season. So I think he's going to have something to say before the Union are done. But Santos has been the guy. And so I see some similarities with him and Abobasi and just the way that they play and just sort of popping up in dangerous areas, putting the ball in the back of the net. But they're not clinical goal scorers like a Joseph Martinez or a Zlatan Ibrahimovic or something. They do the work defensively. They run. They put some pressure on your defense. They do sort of all the little things. But also Portland has that option of bringing a designated player off the bench. You've seen that rotation at the striker position. I said before in Yaroslav Skoda, one of the questions with Portland coming into this tournament is what do you do at striker, because they weren't really sold on Abobasi. which I don't necessarily agree with. But so you're playing with four strikers essentially. Only three of them are going to start, but it's two for each team. Who can make the difference there? It's just fascinating to me how similar these two teams are. The one difference, and at the end of the day, this is why I'm going to go with Philadelphia to win this game, is that Steve Clark has been shaky at times, nearly cost Portland its existence in this tournament, and Andre Blake may be the best player in this tournament. He has been spectacular in net for the Union, and this is the Andre Blake where he was in the conversation, and you've got Keylor Navas of Costa Rica, so he's probably second. But there was a moment where he was in the conversation for the best goalie in CONCACAF, not just MLS. When he was, playing in the Gold Cup final for Jamaica and at the peak of his power with the Union. And he's just not been quite as good the past couple seasons. He had some real struggles last year of just being confident and making good decisions and coming off his line and actually getting the ball. He misjudged some things. He just looked shaky and a little bit just lack of confidence. But all of a sudden, he looks to be back in tip-top form. He's been spectacular, and that's how good he can be. He is a phenomenal goalkeeper when he's at his best. Philly's going to need him to do that again if they're going to win this game. But I'm going to say that Philly does this. And Andre Blake comes up big again, stands on his head, and whether it's because you get a counterattack or scoring off a set piece or whatever it might, a Steve Clark mistake, winning the shootout, I got no clue how it's going to happen, but I'm going to say the Union win this game. That's all we have for today's show. We'll be back on Thursday to talk all things Champions League, Europa League, as the domestic seasons are over, but the European contests now continue. Just a very unique situation to have them being played after everybody finishes their league season, but we're in strange times, so that's the reality we live in. And we'll also talk about the promotion playoff final, preview the other MLS Cup is back semifinal. Plenty to talk about on Thursday, but that's all for today's show. Chris Brown's coming up in exactly an hour, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on 110 Sports Live with Around the Bases. Josh Molnix will be back tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern with the J-Mole Show. Plenty happening. Make sure to check out our website, 110sportsmedia.com. Sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss anything that's happening. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you Thursday.